Hello and welcome to The Download from Wise Woman and Wordsmith, where insight meets inspiration. A space for creatives, dreamers and visionaries ready to spark new ideas, ignite purpose and reimagine possibilities. Here we share downloads of wisdom, stories and strategies to help you thrive in your creative journey. I'm your host, Jill Marshall. Tune in, connect and let the magic unfold.
Joy tomorrow.
So I've just seen the unveiling of the Bridget Jones statue in Leicester Square and was once again struck by, well, firstly, the incredible impact of this beloved character, statues, but mainly by the utter respect and admiration devoted to Bridget's creator, Helen Fielding. She's such an intrinsic part of every event and happening around Bridget, the books, the films, the large metal objects, and that doesn't happen with every creator. And when Renee Zellweger was asked at the event if there'll be another film, her first call was, "Where's Helen?" Because without Helen, there is no Bridget. What also struck me was that Helen Fielding then said in response to that same question, "If it's something authentic that comes from the heart, then I wouldn't say no." In other words, if she's inspired by a new story, she says, then it's always possible. And that made me first go, yay, another one, and also to think about what comes before the story, before the books and the films and the Leicester Square positioning. What comes first? You see, there's a friend I've had for as long as I can remember. Not a childhood playmate, not someone from school or university, not one of those luminous soulmate-level friends who arrive and rearrange your world. No. This friend is older than all of them, wilder than all of them, more loyal than almost any human being I've ever known, and infinitely more honest. This week, in our season of Friends, and recognising that we all love a friend like Bridget Jones, I want to talk about the friend called inspiration. She's elusive, but not unreliable. Feral, but not fickle. Demanding, but never cruel. Generous, but always convenient. Although she's been with me from the beginning, it's only recently that I've realised she is the constant thread of my life. Not publishing, not success, not work, not stability, not reputation. Inspiration has never left me, not once, even when I left her behind. So, if I trace it back, my first meeting with inspiration isn't one moment. It's a collection of sensations. I was one of those kids who didn't so much play as disappear into worlds. I could be in a room with people and yet utterly elsewhere, and I still can do that, having full conversations with characters in my head that nobody else could see. And I remember the feeling of it, that fizzy, delicious hum, like the air above a candle flame. It's barely visible, but it's charged with heat. Ideas didn't arrive as thoughts. They arrived sort of as atmospheres, as if a doorway opened and a little breeze blew through, carrying a scent from another place. This is how inspiration met me. Not then with lightning bolts, not with a cliché of a muse perched on a rock, but with a particular quality of attention, hers and mine, that shimmered at the edges of ordinary. And every time I recognised her, even before I had language for it. Some children have imaginary friends. I had inspiration sliding in beside me, whispering, what if, just what if, everything could be different? And as soon as I did have language, I created games with friends, dances and songs and small musical theatre productions to be performed in greenhouses, aged 6 or 7. Skits and comedy sketches to win school competitions, aged 9 or 10. Plays to be shared among classmates, aged 11 or 12. Stories and more stories written for class time and in secret, and for the magazines of the day, notably, for those who remember, Debbie, and then Jackie, never published, by the way. And then books. My first at 13, about an alien called Sweaty Socks. And more of all of the above all throughout my teens, carrying on into academic and work life through a love of words and story and connecting with hearts and minds. But sometimes when she has to, inspiration gets pushy. Let's go back January 2000. I'd just had my heart broken. Not a gentle heartbreak, not the sort that leaves you quietly sad. A heart broken, wide open. As I was lying there, trying to figure out how not to be so miserable, how to pick up the pieces, how to breathe, then it happened. Inspiration appeared, not as a whisper, not as a suggestion, not as a muse, as a command. Be a children's writer. Do it. It came like St. Michael's sword through my sternum, a light, a flash, a calling. It was overnight, absolute, unignorable, and unarguable. And really, just like that, the trajectory of my life changed. In the years to come, the MA, the agents, the deals, the film and TV options, the book tours, the signings, the next series, and then the next and the next. The golden decade of external momentum. All of it traces back to that one moment. Inspiration wasn't asking me, she wasn't suggesting, she was the door, and I had very little choice but to walk through it. And what followed were 10 years of incredible external flowering. I completed my master's degree in writing for children. I secured an agent with my thesis book for my master's degree, now available in updated form as Glossop Girl. I got another global agent. I signed trade publishing deals with 3 different major publishers, had film and TV options on my work, wrote new series, planned sequels, I toured, I signed books and spoke at events. The call of the big time was underway. It was exhilarating, intoxicating. It was everything I had dreamed of in my heart's quiet moments. This was the decade that cemented me in the publishing world externally. And all the while, inspiration was there, quietly, the pulse behind the momentum. But then came 2011. I'd been inspired by a request from my publishers to write a new series, a story that felt to me luminous and aligned and funny and essential. I had a 2-book deal for it and every likelihood of more to come. But as the details unfolded, the title, the direction, the imposed frameworks, it just didn't feel right. It wasn't the story inspiration had given me. And so I withdrew. Everything collapsed. And in that void, instead of turning inward to inspiration, I turned outward. I focused on other writers, other projects, launches, ambitions, egos, alignments, and a kind of nightmare ensued. With my energy not focused on my own inspired stories, I followed some fairly uninspired trajectories into a feverish self-sabotage. And if you recognise the same kind of trajectories in your own life, then maybe you and I should have a little chat about what archetypes are running the show. Throughout all this, a few wonderfully true souls remained constant, but some friends, people I had championed, helped, supported, turned against me. Some disappeared quietly, some aligned with others to protect their own interests. Some behaved with a kind of theatrical, almost storybook malice, plotting, factioning, whispering not so quietly, manoeuvring like characters from a drama you couldn't imagine in real life. It was an era of betrayal and abandonment. And to be fair, maybe that's what they thought I was doing at the time as well, although I wasn't, and I was literally throwing everything I had and was and could do into fixing things, to no avail. But whatever the case, it was a time when some of my human friends fell away. And yet through it all, inspiration never left. So this is the part of the story that few see, because it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't public. It was the underground flowering of my creativity. Even without deals, tours, or fanfare, I wrote as many books, actually more, than in the golden decade. The story I'd actually wanted to write for that publishing deal that broke, I went ahead and wrote it anyway, a series of 4 magical novels. I was inspired to finish a trilogy where the first 2 had already been published. I was then inspired by one movie moment to bring them all together into a franchise. And meanwhile, I ventured into other areas, into YA books that were deeply, for me, intuitive, experimental, soul-driven. Breathe, Pineapple, Fan Mail, and in the inspiring surrounds of a new home, Glossop Girl. And through this, inspiration became stronger and fiercer and more loyal than ever. Some human friends drifted, but inspiration stayed. She curled up beside me in the dark and whispered insistently, "You are not done. You are not finished. Keep going." Creatives among you will recognize this drive to keep creating, inspired by this turn and that. Even if it was all under the radar, the subterranean years weren't silent. They were alchemy years, years of inner growth, pattern recognition, and deepening intuition. Years where the external scaffolding fell away and the inner architecture of creativity strengthened. And I have to say, inspiration hasn't only shown up for my writing. She has arrived disguised in unexpected forms, pushing me towards leaps that had nothing to do with trade publishers or book deals. For instance, she whispered the idea for this podcast, at first disguised as a test ground for someone else's project, and then insisted, "This is yours." She's nudged me to move across the world. She encouraged me to mentor new editors. She pulled me into performance, dancing with the stars, singing with the biggest choir in the world, just to stretch the boundaries of what I believed I was capable of. And she led me to experiment with television and multiple creative channels, and even to design a couple of apps unrelated to publishing at all, just to see what could happen when I said yes. Each time, the external form has changed, but the essence is the same. The insistence that I keep moving, keep experimenting, keep responding to the threads only I could follow. Inspiration, for me, is not just about writing books. She's about expanding presence, expression, and daring to take the next step, even when no one else is watching. Carl Jung wrote about the demon, the inner guiding spirit that calls the soul into destiny, describing it as a force that often demands radical realignment, like a friend who arrives unannounced and insists you follow a path that makes no immediate sense, yet ultimately reveals itself as your true work. Goethe saw inspiration as a river that must be entered willingly or risk losing the vision entirely. He warned that you cannot command her, only follow. Rilke advised artists to live the questions now, trusting that the answers and the impulses that would guide them would come later. He understood inspiration as patient, stubborn, and often frightening. Even contemporary thinkers, psychologists and neuroscientists, and those studying flow states point to the same phenomenon. The mind, when quieted enough, allows inspiration to speak. It's always present, but the surface self must yield, or she'll retreat. For me, this was precisely what happened. January 2000, the Jungian demon arrived as a thunderbolt. Later, when my trade publishing presence collapsed, she waited in the shadows, a force unbowed by contracts, agreements, or human politics. And it's important to recognise that she never moves in lines. She moves in spirals. Themes that return but are transformed. Old symbols revisit with a new resonance. Ideas that were tiny whispers bloom decades later into stories or projects or apps. Let me just mention Gossip Girl again. First written for my MA, based on family memoirs, and then rewritten once the place I was in nudged me to give it a new setting, a new resonance, a new energy. The spiral pattern is not just the Fibonacci sequence, but the secret language of creativity. It's how inspiration teaches patience, attention, and deep trust in your inner guidance. Because there's also this: inspiration doesn't travel alone. She brings intuition with her. Inspiration knocks and intuition answers. Inspiration sparks and intuition resonates, or not. Some ideas feel alive and others fall flat. Some projects energize you and others drain you. And the most significant work comes from letting these two friends coordinate the timing. To be honest, falling off a career cliff in 2011 and into a mire of something noxious and pretty terrible could have stopped me from tuning in. But in retrospect, it became a pivot towards myself. Inspiration didn't disappear. She waited. Eventually, I remembered. I turned inward. I reclaimed the friendship with inspiration. And now, like my oldest and greatest friends, she's a constant guiding force, a heartbeat in my life. So what have I learned about inspiration? Here are 9 reflections to consider. Make space, even a little. Quiet attention opens the doorway. Inspiration rarely arrives when you're frantically busy or overscheduled. She shows up in the cracks, the moments when you are still. Even 5 minutes of stillness can invite her. I find staring at and listening to trees helps a lot. Secondly, follow the odd symbolic impulses. She speaks in strange codes. Sometimes it's a pattern, a phrase, a fleeting image. Sometimes they're years apart. When I began Pineapple, I'd just been to a memorial service. The story arrived complete in my head as the last post rang out across the town square, and it linked 2 separate but related items I'd watched on TV. At first it felt irrational. Why follow this thread? But I did it anyway. That thread became the spine of the book, a story I could not have conceived with logic alone. Inspiration often nudges us towards the weird, the offbeat, the uncanny. Follow her there. Notice recurring themes. If a story, a motif, or a phrase keeps appearing, it matters. In my career, the theme of friendship has recurred again and again, from my children's books and adult fiction to the YA books that I wrote post-2011. These repetitions weren't accidents. They were inspiration, signalling that something in my own experience or in the collective consciousness wanted attention. And here I am again in a season of Friends. Paying attention to these patterns can guide not just the work, but your personal growth. Next, don't measure by external outcomes. This is a hard one, but inspiration doesn't care about contracts, applause, or bestseller lists. In my career stage 1, I had 14 book deals with 3 of the biggest publishers in the world. In stage 2, I wrote without publishers, without deals, without expectation of commercial success. And yet, they're some of my most satisfying, intuitive works, exactly the books I needed to write for myself and for the future. Inspiration calls to the inner world first, and the outer world is optional. Next, let yourself be led. She rarely shows you the full path. When I was drafting the Breathe manuscript, I had no idea where it would end up. I was actually enjoying playing with a literary conceit and seeing if I could pull it off. Trusting the process, allowing myself to be guided page by page, became the act of faith that let the book fully emerge, which is interesting when it is a book about having faith. Inspiration asks us to walk forward, even when the map is incomplete. And then trust. When everything fell apart, it was easy to despair. The contracts disappeared, friends fell away, the visible signs of success were gone. But beneath the surface, I was writing, experimenting, following threads of intuition. Those years were very fertile, invisible, but transformational. Inspiration thrives in these quiet, unseen spaces. Trust that these times are never wasted. They are the soil where the next flowering occurs. And lastly, it's a biggie. Say yes before you're ready. Readiness is a myth. I didn't know I was going to create a podcast. I just sort of did it and set off before I was remotely ready, although I do recognise that the universe had provided me already with the technical skills and know-how to pull it off if I could just create some content. So that's what I did. No prevaricating or planning for months, just some research and a lot of getting on with it. I didn't know that I'd do a season of Friends in that podcast. I was just inspired to do it. I know many of you have enjoyed the real-life tales of crazy adventures with these friends and more, but this week I was inspired to create something more inward than outward. It felt right. I didn't know an awful lot when I started, but I do know this. I love it. It's great fun for me, and I hope for you too. So here's my closing invitation, and that's to welcome an unusual friend into your life. Inspiration is waiting. In fleeting images, in symbolic nudges and patterns and coincidences. She's ready for you to walk beside her again, to say yes, to trust and to create. And when you let her in, fully, wildly, without negotiation, your life, your work and your intuition spiral forward into their next layer. Thanks for tuning in to the Download podcast. Feel free to like, comment and share. Also, I'd love to hear more about your own intuitive hits and downloads. So do find us on Facebook, YouTube and more.